My lords, my ladies, and everybody else here not sitting on a cushion.
Hello and welcome to Staff Picks, the podcast for movie nerds by movie nerds. As always, I'm Mario Lanza, and I will be your host in our walk through the movies out there that are a little underrated, a little underloved, maybe unknown. Our movie today isn't so much unknown. It's just one of these that I really feel is underloved. It's one of these I know has been floating around for years. I don't really think it got the credit it deserved. It's one of these that I know a lot of people who feel real strongly about it, but I also know a lot of people who haven't seen it since it came out. They kind of just watched it once and forgot about it. And our movie I'm talking about is A Knight's Tale from 2001, the Heath Ledger jousting vehicle. And my guest today, this is going to be a fun one because this guy is a huge fan of this movie as well. I'm very excited that I actually found someone who seems to be equally as excited to talk about A Knight's Tale as I am. Let's see, he is a podcaster from Chicago. He runs an RPG podcast, talks about movies a lot, and in the spirit of Geoffrey Chaucer, I'll introduce him as the protector of Italian virginity, the one and only James D'Amato. Welcome.
Man, and who better to protect virginity than the host of an RPG podcast? Hi, everyone. I'm James. I run the One Shot podcast, where we put together a different group of performers and game designers and different notable nerds from around the internet every month, and we play a new role-playing game. And we release weekly episodes that are our adventures with these various role-playing games. So it's sort of like old-fashioned radio plays in dozens of different genres. If you're a film person, we sort of try to take a very cinematic approach to everything and have fun with it. You can check that podcast out along with some of the other great shows on our network over at oneshotpodcast.com. I am also a game designer, and I was told I could plug all my stuff up top. I've got a card game that's going to be coming out in mid-June. We're going to start up a Kickstarter for that. If you are interested, it is a card game that sort of combines pro wrestling with a fantasy gladiator arena. So like D&D meets WWE. If you're interested in that, you can sign up for the mailing list over at bit.ly/dungeondome. None of that's capitalized. And the last thing, I wrote a book about role-playing games that's full of exercises that folks who have always been interested in role-playing games or who are even diehard fans who want to know how they can get more out of their role-playing experience can go through and do some of these exercises to really invest themselves in that fictional world and have fun with it and even play when there's nobody else there to play with you. And you can find that book on Amazon if you just search James D'Amato. It's much easier than searching the, I think, very long title that the publisher came up with. But it is called The Ultimate RPG Character Backstory. And you can check that out there. Mario, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Oh, yeah, this is exciting. This is like when nerds collide, because I'm excited to hear your history and your how long you've been doing a podcast. Clearly, you've been doing this for quite a while, huh?
Yeah, I'd say I have been podcasting now for almost 6 years, and I've been doing One Shot for just about 5 years. Coming up in August, it's going to be my 5th year doing it. So I've been around a while now.
Excellent. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear how you and I kind of met up for this movie, and I'll give people a little history that a lot of times for the show, I'll have a movie that I know someone else likes, so I'll just arrange it. We're going to talk about it. Like I know people that like Drop Dead Gorgeous and like Harold and Maude, and I just know that they're the expert on that movie, so we'll talk about it. With A Knight's Tale, it was a little different, and I should point out I've never met James before. I just happened to be looking the other day on the internet. I was looking for someone who loves A Knight's Tale, and I didn't really know anybody off the top of my head. And I went to Twitter, and I searched A Knight's Tale, and James had literally tweeted that morning something along the lines of, "Hey, America, you remember when A Knight's Tale was the best movie of 2001, right?" And I'm like, that's my guy. That's the guy I want to talk to.
Yeah, I mean, I very much love A Knight's Tale for so many reasons, and I'm actually surprised because in my friend group, A Knight's Tale is one of those sleeper classics. It's one that we always talk about as one of our favorite movies, but it does seem like, you know, it never got a sequel. there was nothing sort of built around it. It was just this movie that sort of inhabited this very surreal space, and that was it. That's all we got. And I really liked it. It's one of the few movies that I've like watched all the director's commentary for and like tried to learn all that I could about it because it had a surprising effect on me.
And we'll get into the plot here of the movie for people who haven't seen it or who don't remember it. But I'm just curious off the top of my head here, why does this movie call to you? What is it, the one or two things that really, when you think about A Knight's Tale, what jumps out to you?
This is my favorite sports movie. Like bar none, that's it. It has all of the tropes of a sports movie, but it's putting it in a wildly different context. And I think like if there were a movie to like sort of rival it as a sports movie, the closest thing I can get is Speed Racer. Like all of the other sports movies that you see, that they've taken that formula a little bit too seriously for me to engage with. And also I generally am not a sports guy, but A Knight's Tale like touches on all of these classic tropes, many of them very bad. But it does it in this really tongue-in-cheek way, and it's so much fun to see how they're layering fantasy, or not really fantasy, how they're layering like these medieval tropes on top of things that like are so familiar to us, and like we have a really big cultural context and language to understand. You can like beat by beat watch this movie and go, oh, that's this scene where they essentially like explain the entire sport in a way that doesn't give you any idea of the nuance, but makes you feel like you understand how it works. Mm-hmm. There's just so much in it that calls out to those classic sports tropes.
One of the earlier episodes we did on Staff Picks was a movie that is near and dear to my heart from the late 90s, which is kind of a sports movie in the same way and kind of a period piece, but it's very anachronistic and there's a lot of goofy modernisms that were brought into it, and that's The Quick and the Dead by Sam Raimi. Are you familiar with that one?
I have not seen this one.
Oh, okay. That is one of my all-time, I wouldn't say guilty pleasures. Again, that's not a word I like using on the show because guilty implies I feel bad about it. I don't feel bad. That's a fantastic movie. But The Quick and the Dead and A Knight's Tale just are like brothers from the same mother. It's like they're very similar in their structure, kind of the way they turn an old sport on its head. And it's just the same little spirit of trying to modernize it and make it a little goofy. And that's the thing. A Quick and the Dead never really found an audience, and it was a notorious flop. It just absolutely got hammered to the point that it almost made Sam Raimi quit directing. He didn't want to direct anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
And so, like A Knight's Tale is really very similar, and that's what I'll recommend to my listeners if you like The Quick and the Dead, because I think I turned a lot of people on to that one. This is absolutely the closest I can think of to that movie. They're just the very similar style, spirit, and again, now, Knight's Tale wasn't a huge bomb. I mean, it wasn't a huge hit, but it unfortunately came out in that time right before 9/11 when all of a sudden you kind of forgot about pop culture for a while right after that. It was just, yeah, it wasn't a huge hit. It wasn't a flop. It was just kind of forgettable, but it was just so
it was
odd.
really,
yeah.
I think you're right. Terrorism destroyed this movie, I think, is the message that we can all carry away.
Yes.
And that's
those guys were just jerks.
Yeah, they really attacked us at our core.
But yeah, the thing I was going to say is that, and then the added thing about this is that this is Heath Ledger's one of his big coming out movies. He had 10 Things I Hate About You, and this I think might have been the next big one. And for years, he became obviously a very well-respected actor, very, very, very well-acclaimed young actor, but he didn't like this movie. He didn't like talking about it. He was kind of embarrassed by it. Or had you heard that?
I had not heard that. That's such a shame.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I think he took himself a little too seriously, and again, maybe he should have because he had a very accomplished career. But that's one thing I think that always hurt this movie, that he so did not want to be known for this movie that it just kind of got dropped, I think.
I mean, I guess that I can understand that because if it had been like something that's overly too successful, like. To me, it's one of those movies that I could see, like, why wasn't there a sequel to this movie? It feels like such a thing that you could build a franchise around because it was so obsessed with its own universe. You're not licensing money from anyone to make it. But Heath Ledger obviously, went on to be such an acclaimed actor and renowned for being very serious. So I think it is a sort of role that he could have fallen into and not climbed his way out of. So perhaps a good career move. Though disappointing to I suppose just me and people like me.
Yeah, the 10 Knight's Tale fans out there, we were heartbroken. They never explored this any further. Now, did you see this when it first came out in the theater? I'm curious how you kind of stumbled into it.
I did. I saw this when it first came out in theaters. And I was like so young when this came out. I must have been in sixth grade. Sixth grade. And my parents just took me on a whim. I don't know if it's like, I don't know how people made the decision to see different movies in the past. Mm-hmm. But it was just, like, hey, we're going to go see a movie. And it was this one. And I remember my childhood friend David, like we took him to this movie, and nobody who went to see it had any sort of expectations or preconceptions about what this movie was. And we came out and it was just a delight. It was just a weird delight where everybody who left the theater, we were all like, we liked that movie. That was a good movie.
Yeah, that's something I was thinking, because I unfortunately did not see it in the theater. I didn't catch it until a couple years later. And that's the one thing that always strikes me when I watch this movie is like, I bet this movie killed in theaters. This movie is such a little populist hit like Rocky, and it just absolutely is merciless in the way it kind of builds up to that, this big, exciting ending that everyone's cheering, and you have the horrible villain getting his comeuppance, and it's one of those I really wish I would have seen in a crowded theater. And again, maybe the theater wouldn't have been crowded. I don't know what the summer was like for the box office or anything, but like this is one I really wish I would have seen with an audience. I really think this works well in a group.
Absolutely. It is one movie that when I take it out to watch it again, I always want to watch it with someone, mm-hmm. And it can be a group of people who, we've all seen it before and we love it, or I'm showing it to someone for the first time. It's one of those where if it's on TV and I'm alone, I'm not into it as much. And, the sheer delight of showing this movie to someone for the first time, like that's definitely what I'm in it for.
Yeah, this has got to be one of is funnest a word? I always struggle if that's a word or not. This is one of the funnest or most fun movies I've ever seen. And that's one thing I think that kind of gets lost sometimes in cinema, how going to the movies is supposed to be fun. And that's the only word I can use in this movie. This is such a fun movie. It's like such a delight, and again, it's got the the big cartoony heroes. It's got the big cartoony villain. We'll talk about Rufus Sewell here in a minute. One of my all-time favorite movie villains.
So good. Fun is absolutely what you want to emphasize with this movie, because like I come away from watching this movie and like I'm left with the feeling of like, oh well, that's fun and original, but nothing about it is original, right? Like it's a Frankenstein's monster built out of other movies and put in this weird context, this weird medieval garb that doesn't really belong there, but it all fits together in like a way that is just delightful. It's like candy.
Yeah, one thing that I brought up in one of my earlier podcasts is I'm a little older than you, so we had kids starting in the year 2000, and so from about the year 2000 to 2006 or so, I was really out of the loop in pop culture. I didn't know what was out there, and this movie kind of came out in the black hole there, where that's why I didn't see it in the theater. But for years, kind of the struggle there as someone who loves movies is I was always trying to find movies we could watch at home with the kids around that weren't super offensive, but were still exciting enough for me as a grown-up that I could, like, it wasn't like a dumb Disney movie.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and this is one of those. I think I always say School of Rock and like A Knight's Tale and Shrek were like the three in that era that I thought were legitimately really funny and really awesome. And my kids grew up watching A Knight's Tale, and again, it's kind of violent, but they're the same way as me. They love this movie because they saw it so many times growing up, because it was one of those that was just kind of right there in the middle in that sweet spot that kids would like it and adults would like it. Although, admittedly, not every adult likes it. I've read some of the reviews. I know this got mixed reviews. And it's funny when I read the original reviews of this movie now saying that it's anachronistic and it's not realistic. And I'm like,
it's like, yeah, dude.
The opening scene is a bunch of 14th century English villagers chanting, "We will rock you" at a jousting match. I don't think it's going for realism right off the bat.
That's such oh God. It's like, that is the worst version of the word nerd. That's what it means. If you're a film critic and you're like, that's not what it's like, dude, that is definitely not the point, and is nowhere near the point. That can't be the criteria that you're judging this movie on.
Yeah, no, Queen was not there. I'm calling BS. Queen was not there in England in 1370. This movie's wrong.
I've done my research.
Yeah, and if people want to see this movie, again, I'm hoping people are familiar with this movie and how goofy it is and how odd it is, featuring a 70s classic rock soundtrack in medieval jousting. But like, go watch the trailer. Just watch the original trailer for A Knight's Tale, and it's hilarious because it's shots of Heath Ledger jousting and all this exciting action going on, and it's literally "We Will Rock You." They're playing "We Will Rock You" over it in the soundtrack, and like you're going, "What the hell is this movie?"
The soundtrack of this movie is legitimately great. Though I was watching it with a friend recently, and she pointed out to me that like they don't use it in the way that like you would hope or expect. It's just like great songs that you're like, oh yeah, I love this song. Mm-hmm. Why is it in this particular scene? We Will Rock You, I think, is one of the legitimately great picks that was used super well. But yeah, there's a lot of like real classic rock that shows up in this movie at some very strange and fun moments.
Yeah, if you've ever wanted to see a jousting movie that ends with AC/DC singing "You Shook Me All Night Long," this is your choice. I mean, I know there's other choices out there, but this is the superior version of that.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll get into the movie here in a second. I just want to say a couple things off the top of my head, just off that I love about this movie. It's got Heath Ledger in this great star-making role, just this great period costume movie. And again, it's super goofy, but at the same time, about an hour from the ending, all of a sudden they flip a switch and it's super dramatic. Is that something you notice as well?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's following a sports formula, though. Like, I think if you watch any sports movie, especially those aimed at kids, like it starts off with building this cast of characters that's, you know, outsiders and misfits and weirdos. And like, there's a lot of fun. You're enjoying that, like Sandlot. Mm-hmm. And then much like Sandlot, it like delves into some weirdly, you know, dark territories. You're like, oh, wow, the mood sort of got brought really far down, huh? As these kids all go their separate ways. So like it is the classic sports formula of we're going to put together our misfit team of outsiders and weirdos, have all this fun. And then like, unlike a sports movie, like there are two types of sports movie, right? There's the one where you have people who are good at what they're doing. And so they're winning. And then you have the people who are constant underdogs until they win right at the end. This one is like, no, they're good at what they're doing. They're going to win. And we're just setting up that big confrontation at the end. And they just pile stakes onto that to the point where you are being bombarded with wild tropes that are just coming at you like, wow, they're going for an emotional knife that I don't know if they earned, but they found it.
Yeah, I'll go. Let's admit it. Do you tear up at the end with the blind dad?
I don't tear up for this movie that much. I do, like, this is a movie where I'll be watching on the couch and I will like audibly shout yes at like various moments. But this one to me is not much of a tearjerker.
Okay, just checking. Because I would never admit that I tear up at Knight's Tale. That's so anybody who thinks
there's no shame in it. It's okay. It's so engaging. It's fine to tear up.
Again, I admitted that at The Quick and the Dead. I kind of tear up at the end. I tear up at the end of this one because it's so well done. And again, I didn't even kind of catch that it's really following all the sports tropes. But you're absolutely right that we get to the end, and yeah, we really follow the Rocky formula right at the end here, and we'll talk about that. Yeah, two more things before I wanted to get into this is that this movie kind of has a reputation of being this stupid, silly, anachronistic night movie. But what I love about it, and this is the thing that a lot of people wouldn't know unless you really pay attention to it, is that there's a lot of clever literary jokes in it and allusions to like Geoffrey Chaucer and the Canterbury Tales. And there's all sorts of fun little things going on for English majors and people who know like medieval history. So I just wanted to point that out. This movie is not as stupid as it appears.
Yeah, exactly. And it sort of, it relishes in the stupidity that it has. And it's a great sort of entryway for people who are like, you know, trying to instill that. Like, this is a movie where a particularly put upon history teacher could throw this on, or literature teacher could throw this on to like inspire some interest. Like, I will tell you, as a kid who watched this like when I was in 6th grade, I did go out after this movie to like look up the works of Chaucer and try reading some of those. I feel lied to and betrayed in this movie, as Chaucer in this movie is a fantastic and charismatic figure who I fell deeply in love with, and the actual Chaucer sucks. And is so hard to engage with his writing and his works. But, you know, it definitely sort of inspires wonder, which I think is one of the key things that you need to do in order to teach someone something. Like, you need to inspire that fascination somehow. And why not do it through a dumb sports movie?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point, because I can imagine people going out, and this movie is so engaging but odd at the same time that you maybe actually want to go and, like, if you're a kid, you watch this movie, you go out and you want to go read about these medieval jousting tournaments and what courtly love was like, because there is a lot of, despite the goofiness in this movie and despite the fact that the actors have accents that are all over the place and no one's apparently from the same continent. But yeah, it's just it inspires wonder, and it makes this world come alive, and I think that's something the director, Brian Helgeland, I don't know how to pronounce that. But he had said in interviews that he wanted to bring this period alive, and he said, you know, if you show a movie with like medieval music, it's not going to come alive because that's not relevant to you. That doesn't bring excitement or anything. So he's like, even though they wouldn't have had this music back then, the music they would have had would have been equally as exciting to them. It would have been like a rock concert coming to these events, and that's what he was trying to do. He just wants to inspire wonder and make this age come alive. And I think one of the other quotes he said was that, you know, anybody else doing a jousting movie, they'd put like orchestra music in there. And he's like, they didn't have orchestra music back then either. So it's like that would be equally inaccurate. So it's like, yeah, there's some weird choices that went into making this movie, to the point that one of my friends said this is one of the ballsiest movies he's ever seen because it shouldn't have worked. But it just does. And again, there's so much love and attention to detail behind it. I cannot not fall in love with this movie. I just love everything about it. And again, we'll get into the cast in a second, but the supporting cast, all the actors, everybody is absolutely fantastic from top to bottom.
Yeah, hard agree. And let's talk more about that wonderful cast too, because, you know, Heath Ledger's there, but there are some real bangers in here as far as cast, because we have, playing, as we mentioned, Chaucer being something that the movie inspires, and it's not just because the movie is called A Knight's Tale. Chaucer is a character in the film, and he's played by Paul Bettany, who, I gotta say, really, really turned in a performance for this one. He chewed the scenery, and it was delightful.
Yeah, the first time I saw this movie, he was the guy that really jumped out at me. I'm like, that is one of the greatest characters in any movie ever. For people who don't know, Chaucer, of course, just this writer, you know him as the guy who wrote the Canterbury Tales, a real-life writer who apparently, James has pointed out, was not particularly a good person in real life. But
I mean, not only Chaucer. So Chaucer's writings are also Middle English writing, which puts them in a historical space where it's hard to engage with someone as someone who's coming from a modern writing perspective, especially if you are at the time a 6th grader looking for the work, just because it is necessarily has not been updated. And the stories themselves are grounded in, like, you know, it's sort of a satirical, like, taking down of churches and royalty, which can be fun and interesting, but the way that it's presented is just like, you know, if you're the type of person who grappled with Shakespeare at all, this is like a couple steps behind that in terms of diction and how words are used. So it's really hard to absorb. Is what I'll say about Chaucer.
All right. Chaucer, we're calling you out.
Yeah, Chaucer, you're on notice.
Yeah, Paul Bettany, absolutely the best character in this movie. He just steals every scene he's in. And again, he's in the movie, they have him as like a wandering writer and poet. He ends up hooking up with this knight, and Chaucer needs a job. He needs some money, so he ends up hooking up with this knight, and he becomes basically like a hype man That would be the equivalent.
Oh.
Yeah, he walks out there and he introduces the night before every joust, and all of his introductions are so over the top. They're like WWE. It's like a monster truck rally. Yeah, and like you said, Bettany just chews the scenery left and right, and it's awesome to the point that the other heralds in the movie, they start trying to imitate him. So like they start doing a Chaucer impression as they introduce their knights as well, and it's hilarious because they're terrible at it and he's really good. And it's one of these things that you just always appreciate when you see this movie, how good he is.
It's a delightful like subplot that sort of springs up around what he brings to the role. And I will say the way they play Chaucer in this movie is the way that I see Shakespeare get played in a lot of movies,
Mm-hmm.
and that he is this charismatic and fun character who is like very into the wit and the word. And they play with that so much. And I really am curious what Paul Bettany thought of this movie afterwards, because I really think he brought it. Like, there was not much left on the table. And speaking of other people who were delights in this movie, there's also Alan Tudyk,
Mm-hmm.
Who plays a minor supporting role. And thinking of Tudyk today, he is stealing almost every scene that he's in, even when he's not physically in those scenes. Like, I'm thinking of like The Tick and God, what
was he in Wreck-It Ralph or one of those movies like that? He was like an animated voice.
Yeah, he was an animated voice. I think he was in Wreck-It Ralph, and also he was in the Star Wars movie. Rogue One.
Okay.
As the delightful robot in that one. So like Alan Tudyk is somebody who's like really a scene stealer. In this, he plays a great supportive role that's still very funny. He's playing like a squire who's like part of like the original posse that Heath Ledger's character sort of rolls out with.
Yeah, it's the thing about Alan Tudyk is hilarious because every time you see him in a movie, he's different. You don't realize that's Alan Tudyk a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the one that really jumps out at me is you see you don't watch a lot of sports movies, but the Jackie Robinson movie.
Oh, I did not.
Alan Tudyk plays the most horrible racist baseball manager who just screams racial epithets at Jackie Robinson. Like it's one of the most uncomfortable scenes you're ever going to see in a movie. And that's Alan Tudyk. And I remember seeing that. I'm like, that's the guy from A Knight's Tale. Like, how is that the same person? But he's so horrible and just brutal. And I would watch just for that scene where he absolutely steals that movie as just a horrible person.
I can't imagine that for Alan Tudyk. That's wild.
Yeah, he's this old, wily 1950s baseball manager. It's crazy. So that's the kind of depth that this guy has. And then Bettany's a famous scene stealer. And you got Tudyk, who's a scene stealer. You got Mark Addy, who's the other squire, who's another scene stealer. I mean, he's in the full Monty just off the top of my head. And I know there's other stuff as well. But, like, he's known for, like, stealing scenes. And then who else is in there? And then Rufus Sewell, I have to talk about him. If I were to make a list of my favorite villains in movies, I would put Count Adhemar, starring by Rufus Sewell, as one of my top. He is such a huge medieval douchebag in this movie. He's so fantastic.
I mean, it is one of the best things because sports movies, generally speaking, like you can try and put stakes on them, but generally speaking, a sports movie is going to have low stakes. Mm-hmm. Like it's you win a game or you lose a game. And sure, maybe winning the game keeps the rec center open, but in the cosmic scope of things, it's not very big. The delight of Count Adhemar is, not only is he a sports movie villain who is like trying to be a romantic rival to our protagonist, but he's like a medieval lord. He leads people into battle, and he makes decisions that get people killed and maimed and worse. And they play with all of those like brooding sports antagonist tropes, but they put them on this guy who is like legitimately a bad person. And the way I love this actor because he sells all of those decisions, and like he doesn't have a ton of dialogue to work with, and most of what we get to see from Adhemar are just of these withering, broody looks that he's giving our cast, and like a underground, dark, seething rage that you get to see from Adamar, and he just goes for it. There's not a lot of people in this film who left anything at home. He did not phone this in.
Yeah, and you don't use this word much when you're talking about these period dramas from the 14th century, but Count Adamar is a dick. That's really, there's no other way to say it. He's just a dick in this movie, and he's forever just antagonizing this poor William Thatcher, who's this poor, squire pretending to be a nobility, and Adamar just hates him, and he's bagging on him, and he's talking about, I'm gonna steal your girlfriend, I'm gonna have her mount me, and then I'll mount her on my wall. Like, in what world could you have ever beaten me? Such a world does not exist. Like, he's so fantastic, and I love Rufus Sewell because I've seen him in a lot of stuff, and he almost always plays a villain. Like, are you familiar with him in other works as well?
I am not. Rufus Sewell is one of the folks who appears in this film that I'm always just like, what happened to this person? They were great.
Oh yeah, no, he's in a ton of period stuff, and there's a Edward Norton movie called The Illusionist where he plays a medieval duke or knight, or I forget what he is, but in that. But like he's a dick in that one too, and he always plays these great villains. And I was reading up on Rufus Sewell. I'm like, why is he such a great villain and stuff? And I was reading when he came out of acting school in like London. He was a comedian, and he was so worried he'd be typecast as a comedy actor that he started doing villain roles, and that's all he is known for now is he became typecast as a villain. But he's like, but I'm really funny in real life.
Oh boy, I mean, I think the comedic touch really helps. Like he is, again, like I said before, this movie is built out of tropes, and he's touching every one of them. Like Adamar as a character is overtly sexist, and like that is on top of like the casual sexism that you have in a medieval society, and he plays that to a T. He's also like, he is a French character in this film about like an English knight and his English squires, and they play that up too. It's so good.
Okay, we've gone about a half hour here. Let's get into the plot of this movie because there's a lot of fun stuff I want to talk about here.
For sure.
Okay, so the plot of A Knight's Tale is thus. That basically there's this medieval jousting champion. His name is Sir Ector. He is a well-known, famous knight, and as they would back in the day, knights travel around the country and they enter tournaments. And each knight has a couple of squires who would be peasants that work with him. And these are like local boys or teenagers that were raised to kind of travel around the country with this lord and help him and, feed his horse and stuff like that. So this guy Ector is traveling around the country and he dies. In the middle of a jousting match, he dies. And what happens, he's got these three squires who are William Thatcher, played by Heath Ledger, and you've got Watt, played by Alan Tudyk, and Roland, played by Mark Addy. And their knight's dead, and unfortunately this is a bad situation for any squire in the 1370s, because now they have no income. Their knight is dead. They have no way to go to tournaments and get...
And he was about to win the tournament, too.
Yeah, he was a good knight. So their knight's dead, and they have nothing to do, and this is one of these things where... tournaments were only open to nobility. You had to be of noble birth to be a knight back in the day. And they're about to win this tournament, and they have gold, and they want to get some food. These are just poor, starving kids. And one of the squires says, well, I could pass off as Sir Ector. Just dress me in the armor. I can get out there. I can take a lance to the head and not get knocked off, and I can probably win the tournament that we were one step from winning anyway. And the other squires are like, you're not noble, right? You're a son of a Thatcher. And he's like, yeah, but I can do it. No one will know. We'll get away with it. We'll get the money. And so that's what happens. He enters the tournament. He dresses up as this poor Sir Ector. He goes out there, and this is the famous scene at the start where everyone is chanting, "We will rock you." Just a very interesting opening to a movie. And he wins the tournament. He wins. He takes his blow. He doesn't get knocked off the horse. And he wins, and they all get all this food. And really, this will drive the rest of the movie where he's going to say, I'd like to keep doing this. That was kind of fun. And the other squires are like, this is not going to end well. You don't want to do this. And he's like, but we could do it. And this really is the plot of the movie.
Yeah, and he is definitely doing it by giving these impassioned speeches about like how he's always wanted to do it and how they have this fantastic opportunity. He's trying to tempt them into his dream of elevating his station. And eventually he manages to, like, after like a scuffle with Watt and Roland, to convince them that like, hey, we can keep pretending to be this knight and keep entering tournaments and get more money. So they have a training montage to Low Rider, which is just...
I always forget about that scene. That's fantastic.
Oh man, it's a delight. And like they come up with all of one of the things that I love about this film is the imagination that went into, what was jousting like and how are people, training to joust. And like some of it seems pretty practical that like, oh, they've got these wooden dummies that they're working with, but other scenes they're like pulling a boat along a river so that he can get a lance through a ring, and all sorts of other delightful things. It's just the creative anachronism behind this movie is really just too much.
Yeah, and that training montage is fantastic. Except the lowrider again, just it comes out of nowhere. And then they're just getting ready because again he's been a knight's basically punching bag for the last 6 years. This William, all he does is stand there as the other knight would ride into him as a practice target. So now he has to learn how to joust and knock people off. So yeah, big long training montage, and they decide he's going to have a name, and he kind of on the spot makes up a name. Instead of William Thatcher, he's going to be Sir Ulrich von Liechtenstein of Gelderland, which is quite a mouthful, as Count Adamar points out later. And so you have this wandering little band of minstrels wandering around, going from tournament to tournament, just really trying to eat. All they want to do is get enough money so they can keep eating. And this is where we run into Chaucer, Paul Bettany, who, again, anybody who knows this movie, and even people when I told my listeners I was going to do A Knight's Tale, they're all like, Chaucer, I remember Chaucer, he was awesome in that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is where we meet Paul Bettany, who... Chaucer, a wandering writer. He also has a gambling problem, so when they meet him, he has just lost all his money, and he has been robbed, and he's basically walking naked down the street down the path in the middle of nowhere, and this is a very awkward exchange, but through a whole series of exchanges here, he will become part of their group when it turns out that he can write anything for anything they need, and one of the things he says is, I can write patents of nobility, which for people who don't know, that proves that you are of royal lineage. So all of a sudden they have a guy here who can forge patents of nobility, and he says, just take me with you, give me clothes, give me food, and I'll write the stuff for you. And that's how he kind of joins their group.
Yeah. And so like that is right before they make it to their first tournament. Mm-hmm. And thanks to Chaucer, they're able to enter this tournament, prove noble birth for this fictional knight that they've created. And he fights. And as he is fighting, he's very good with a sword, not as good with the jousting part of it. And he breaks his armor in the middle of that, which helps us bring in another character. That was Kate, right?
Kate, yeah. I off the top of my head, I don't remember that actress's name. I know she became a big deal because I've read a lot of reviews that said, "Oh, Kate, the blacksmith, that's played by X."
Laura Fraser.
Okay, what is she known for?
I will click on this IMDb and see. Looks like she was in Breaking Bad.
Okay.
And Better Call Saul. So she must be a character on those that I haven't. I haven't really watched those, so I don't know.
That's fine. Well, that's enough of it. But yeah, this will become their merry little band of wandering travelers. You got Sir Ulrich now. You got his two squires. You got Chaucer, his herald, who again is really just his hype man, who walks out there and brags about how awesome Sir Ulrich is to anybody who will listen. Although I will say there's a fantastic joke here, and this is one I have to point out when I say that this movie it seems stupid, but it's got some really smart stuff underneath it. There's a scene where they meet Chaucer for the first time, and he says something like, "I write allegories," and Roland says, or something comes up that something he said is allegorical, and Roland says, "That's for every man to decide for himself," which I swear to God is a literary joke. That's a literary joke about allegories right in this movie.
I mean, there's really good stuff because in this tournament section, we find out about Chaucer's gambling problem as he gets the team into more trouble, and he is caught by Simon the Summoner and Peter the Pardoner in like the gambling issue. Like he owes them money, and if you have read the Canterbury Tales, Simon and Peter are villains in the Canterbury Tales, mm-hmm. and like Chaucer threatens to like destroy them in fiction after he's rescued by William and the rest, and indeed he does. Like if you know anything about the Canterbury Tales, if you have put yourself through the truly unpleasant process of reading those stories, you do manage to get just a couple more jokes out of this movie, which might be worth it.
Yeah, that's something I had noticed as well, the partner and the summoner thing. I didn't know about that because I've never read the Canterbury Tales, or if I did, I don't remember it. I've blocked it out. But yeah, there's a whole subplot in this movie. There's the summoner and the partner hate Chaucer, and Chaucer gets back at them, and he eviscerates them at the end of the movie and says, "I'm going to destroy you in fiction. I can be naked for a day, but you'll be ugly for years or decades because of my writing."
For eternity, yeah.
And that's true. Again, if you read the Canterbury Tales, apparently the partner and the summoner just are described horribly, and so that's how they kind of work this movie into historical fiction.
In this section of the movie, we also meet our love interest for the film, Jocelyn, who is played by Shannon Sossamon. I hope I'm saying that right. And we get the first of what is a parade of truly delightful costumes. The costuming in this movie, like, is fine generally. Like, it's fairly, like, medieval movie. There are a lot of rags. There's a lot of different, like, armor designs going around, whatever. But the costumers who worked on Jocelyn really went for it. When I show this movie to people, the comparison they make is Padme Amidala from the Star Wars franchise, where every new costume that she walks out in and every scene she's in, there is a new costume for her, is amazing.
Yeah.
And the makeup is amazing.
There's one in particular that I always remember where it looks like her head exploded. Like her hair is pointing out in these sharp spikes. Like, how the hell did they do that in medieval times? Like, she looks like she walked right off of a runway in, like, Milan or something. And I always laugh when I see that. Like, who did this girl's hair in 1370 to make it look like that?
Right. Yeah. Like, these part of the anachronism, because there's this really amazing dress that she wears where there is, like, see-through elements to it, and, like, it looks like a mourning garb. It's a delightful costume, but there's no way that is appropriate for the time period.
I think I was reading somewhere that when the director was thinking of costuming for this movie, he's like, well, I just thought that it would be very fitting. I was thinking, what's my favorite music tour of all time? And he thought of the Rolling Stones in the early 70s. And that's all the costumes of this movie are apparently based on the Rolling Stones wardrobe from their 1972 tour. So there's your fun little trivia.
Holy cow. Yeah, that's a new lens to look at this from. Yeah. Wow. So Jocelyn is very much an underdeveloped character, I think. Even though she does get a decent amount of screen time, she, as a character, like, is a clever and independent female character, like, in a time of ubiquitous male oppression. But we don't get too much more from her apart from the fact that, you know, she's very beautiful, and that our protagonist likes her quite a bit.
Yeah, Sir Ulrich definitely has the hots for Jocelyn. And again, this will become a major storyline. I'd even say maybe this movie's about 10, 15 minutes too long, because there's one section in there where they're writing each other and falling in love with each other that I think probably could have been trimmed down a little bit. It gets kind of tedious. Because she really, yeah, Jocelyn will make Sir Ulrich prove his love to her by winning or alternately losing, so she kind of controls his destiny. But yeah. So anyway, we're gonna skip through here because there's a couple interesting characters I want to go through. Once we meet Jocelyn, we meet the love interest, and we have Ulrich winning these tournaments. This is where we meet his antagonist, the wonderfully evil villain Sir Adhemar, just dressed all in black. Rufus Sewell got these really dark eyes, and again, I cannot overemphasize just what a dick this guy is.
Oh yeah. From
day one, and like right from the start, he sees Sir Ulrich flirting with Jocelyn, so he comes over and starts flirting with her just to get under Ulrich's skin. He's like the master of psychology to psych out his opponents. And so this will set up the entire movie of this guy Adhemar, who's undefeated. Nobody's ever knocked him off a horse. He's like the baddest bad guy in jousting, which again, he's like Darth Vader. They're building this guy up, and all these sports tropes are there. Like, this guy is the villain of all villain sports movies. And then we get another character here that becomes very important later in the movie, that apparently Will is not the only person jousting under a fake identity. It turns out that the royal Prince Edward, like the heir to the throne of England, has been jousting across the land. He like enters tournaments under the name Thomas Colville. And this will become important because early on in the movie, Will is jousting him, and Prince Edward is injured, and Edward can't continue, and he's like, but I've never dropped out of a fight. Please give me my honor and let us go down the list and just not joust each other. And so Sir Ulrich will honor that. So he basically treats him with dignity, and Prince Edward says thank you very much. So Prince Edward is out there, and he's been jousting, and Will does the one thing, he gives him his dignity, and then it comes out later in another tournament that that's Edward, that's our future king, and like nobody will joust him, and like they're all scared. Nobody wants to strike a member of the royal family, and Will not do that. Will knows that Edward wants to joust. So even though everyone will back out from actually striking the future king of England, Will's like, well, if he's in a tournament, he wants to do something. He wants to be a part of this, so I'll honor his wishes. So Will actually jousts against him. And it comes out, Edward's like, you knew I was the king and you jousted against me? And Will said, well, it's not in my nature to back down. So this will become very important later in the movie, that Will's the one person who gave this guy Edward a chance and actually jousted with him. And this will come into play later. But before we get to that, let's say the first tournament here, the big one, is the final championship match is Sir Ulrich, this is Will, against his enemy Adhemar. And Adhemar, of course, snarling bad guy, to the point that he's got a little fist on the end of his lance.
I love it.
Yeah, that's the great villain touch. The little fist on the end of his lance.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about the way these jousting scenes were shot and some of the things, because, like I said, I have watched the commentary for this film. The lances that they use, the prop lances, are like hollow lances that are full of spaghetti. Because they found in like the first shots that they were taking, like a pure wooden lance, even if it was like a light wood, would not shatter in a way that was satisfying to watch. And they wanted every single scene with a lance to be a huge explosion of action. So they found, like, when they were packing these props, like if they just filled it with spaghetti, there would always be, a hail of splinters everywhere whenever a lance broke. And each of these shots, like, are happening in slow motion whenever a lance breaks. And, like, even if you don't understand how jousting works, the way it's filmed and the way they're doing their stunts make everything about it look so dynamic and full of energy.
Yeah, it's really cool. And like you said, you can't... Yeah, he's not exaggerating. When these lances hit, they explode every single time. It's just people getting blasted. And, like, whoever did the stunts on this movie, they were insane. Because some of the stuff on this, like... When I watch this now, you think maybe, obviously this is a little, they hype it up a little bit, the drama and the violence and jousting, but I don't understand how anybody could sit there and take a lance to the chest or the head like that at full speed in real life. So these guys had guts, whoever was doing that in real life, and then in the 1400s, but whoever did it as the stunts in the movie, like, that takes guts to sit there and wait for a lance to hit you in the face.
Jousting as a sport was so violent that multiple popes forbid it.
Wow.
But also so popular that did not stop it.
Wow, I did not know that. There's your trivia, your staff picks trivia for the day.
Yeah, and they really captured the energy of what jousting was in these scenes and the way it's shot. Like, I honestly think there are Renaissance fairs around the country and I'm sure the world where you can see jousting still today. And I feel like you are not getting your money's worth unless they're filling those lances with spaghetti, because boy, howdy. And like one other note on the stunt work, some of the stunt work that they do with the horses in this film are incredible. Like, there is one lance blow that they shoot where the horse, mid canter, stops and rolls over backwards, destroying the fence. And they talked about how difficult it was to find a horse who was talented enough to take a dive like that without freaking out.
It was the Chris Farley of horses.
Yeah, just and truly amazing stunt work, because like you look at some of these slow motion shots and okay, like I know this is a stunt person and they're trying to make it safe as it can be, but there's no way that did not hurt.
Yeah, there's one shot in particular where a guy takes a lance to the chest and he goes flipping over backwards and lands on the list, the wooden thing in the middle, chest down. Like, there's no way that didn't hurt.
Oh yeah,
that was amazing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering. I didn't realize. I never thought to look at these stunt horses in the movie. I'll have to watch it next time and pay attention to that. I'm sure, was PETA on hand for that, because some of that stuff might not have been all that ethical with the horses flinging themselves into posts and stuff.
This is still one of those movies that says no animals were harmed in the filming of this movie, and I trust that very much. I just watch it and think, wow, those are some talented horse actors that I'm watching.
For purposes of this movie, horses were classified as explosive squibs, not animals. Okay, so the big tournament comes here, and Prince Edward, nobody will joust him, so he has to withdraw, and it basically comes down to the first big showdown between Ulrich von Liechtenstein and Adhemar, and in this one, the bad guy wins. Adhemar, Ulrich is winning for the first two, and the crowd is behind him. The crowd loves Ulrich because he's got the best herald, he's got Chaucer, and everybody. They just love his style, but then he loses in the end. Adhemar knocks him off, and then Adhemar has to walk over, and he's got this wonderfully douchey taunt. This is one of my favorite things to say to someone when you've bested them, where Adhemar walks over and says, "See me again when you're worthy. You have been weighed, you have been measured, and you have been found wanting."
Yeah, it's dope. It's a dope line for him to drop. I love all of the weird lines that pop up in this movie, and they're things that I like to reference frequently in my own life.
Yeah, if you're ever in like a fantasy baseball draft or fantasy football draft and you steal somebody else's player, drop that line on them because it always kills. You've been weighed, you have been measured, and you have been found wanting. In what universe could you have competed with me? Yeah, so anyway, so that becomes the plot of the movie, that Ulrich is a big star and everyone loves him, but he cannot beat Adhemar. Adhemar is just this asshole, and he's better at jousting, and Will can't beat him. And then Adhemar gets pulled off to war, like he gets sent off to do real knight things. And so Will keeps entering all these tournaments and getting better, but he cannot. He says it doesn't matter because Adhemar's not here. It's no victory without him.
Exactly.
And this will kind of lead into the last hour of the movie.
And the wild thing, like, you can talk, there are a lot of plot contrivances in this movie, but I think one of the most contrived things is, like, they've set up Will as this figure who not only cares very much about becoming a knight, and that's something that we learned he had decided on from when he was very young, but he cares about the craft of competition and tournament. And he likes Adhemar as a rival, and he respects him as a rival, and he wants to be the best, and he knows in order to do that, he has to beat Adhemar. The idea to, like, how do we keep Will as a character at the top of the game and point out that he is undefeatable. Nobody can beat him, but still have an emotional downbeat going into, like, the third act of this movie. And the way that they do it is Will is so emotionally head up about not having Adhemar in the competitions that he drives away his love interest. Like, yes. She is just there to, like, support him and be happy with his performance in the tournament and what have you, and he shouts at her and sends her off and tells her that she is a silly girl because his sports rival is not there to challenge him.
Yeah, the little script writing 101 there, how to force some conflict into the third act here. Yeah, so yeah, we have this big long exchange where Will has sent Jocelyn away. They send letters back and forth, and he finally convinces her to come out and see him joust in Paris.
Oh God, no! Wait, we skipped over one of the best scenes. Which earlier, when he's building his relationship with Jocelyn, there is a dance scene.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because she has to go to the balls and dance, and they have this dance scene to Golden Years by David Bowie, and it's a delight. It is a by the numbers scene where a character says he does not know how to dance, is taught how to dance right before the big ball, and then has his date save him when everybody asks him, like, well, please show us a dance of Gelderland. And everybody in the room, having seen like 2 moves of this dance, starts a professionally choreographed, like, Hollywood dance scene. It's true delight. Like, nothing about it makes sense. The song choice for it is a delight. It's such a great song. Doesn't really fit exactly the scene that is put to, but it's a beautiful spectacle. And so the thing that Will, when he was shouting at Jocelyn about her being frivolous and silly, was her inviting him to another ball. And he's like, I don't care about going to a ball. I care about being the best at jousting. and for that I need to defeat Adamar.
Yeah, I love that dance scene. I almost called it a prom scene because that's really what it is. This movie turns into it's not another teen movie for about 10 minutes where they have a prom in the middle of medieval England and everyone has a professionally choreographed dance that they do, and it's wonderful.
And, like, again, that is such a sports trope, and it's like a younger skewed audience sports trope too. Like, so much of the conflict in this, it feels very high school.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Adamar being this brooding bully figure he is an antagonist who's from a sports movie or a camp movie aimed at children. He's just an adult and has, like, actual power.
Yeah, and let's not forget that when Will is out there on the dance floor unable to do anything, he doesn't know how to dance. Of course, it's Adamar in the background saying, "Why don't you do one of your dances from Gelderland?"
Oh, God, yes. Oh, it's beat by beat. It's so perfect.
Okay, so yeah, Will and Jocelyn have finally hooked up. They do this on again, off again thing, and now they finally hook up. And this is really, we go into the last act of the movie, which is where I say it really kind of switches from being this goofy, kind of fun comedy to a sports movie with real stakes. Like, this gets really dramatic here, where we're going to London. This is like the world championships of jousting apparently are in London every year, and Will's going back there. And this is where we get a moment where we learn a little bit about Will's backstory, that he's been a squire following around this guy Sir Ector all his life, but we find out how that happened. So basically, when he was a kid, he's the son of John Thatcher, the Thatcher in the village, a guy that makes nets and blankets. I don't know what a Thatcher does, but some kind of weaving.
Generally, thatch roofs. A thatcher would put together the straw rooftops that you would have in medieval villages, and that would, protect you from rain and whatnot.
Okay, there you go. So yeah, he's the son of that guy, and he's just this poor Thatcher's kid. And so a long time ago, his dad, when Will was 7, said, "I want to get you a better life. I want you to go out there and change your stars and have a better destiny than just the son of a Thatcher." So he gave his son away to a knight, basically said, "Please raise my son and let him see the world and go out there and have adventures." And that was when Will was 7, and now he's coming back to London for the first time, and this is 12 years later, so he's apparently 19 years old. And this is the first time he's been back in town since his dad basically ditched him and gave him away. So it's very emotional that Will's coming back to his home now, and like he's this big famous knight, even though he's not really a knight, he hasn't been caught yet.
I'm really glad that you used the turn of phrase "back in town," because when they come back to London, it is to "the boys are back in town."
Yeah, yet another great montage. The boys are back in town montage as all the knights return to England, and he's like a big hero now, and we see him parading down the street, and he sees little kids waving to him just like he would have waved to knights back when he was a little boy, and it's really kind of an emotional moment for him. Like, he really did. He had all this fame and glory, and now he's a big knight, and he really did change his stars, and he's going to come back, and he's a big returning hero. And this is what's really going to do Will in, is that he's back here for the championships. Adamar's back. It's his first chance to finally take down Adamar, and Will is going to get greedy, and he's going to go visit to see if his father's still around. He hasn't seen his father in 12 years, and this is what's going to get him in trouble, is that Adamar has sent spies. He sees Will lurking around the poor area of town, and they put 2 and 2 together, and they realize this guy's not really a knight. He's been faking it, and this is really what sets up the end of this movie.
Yeah, and the dramatic beat here, like, you are not kidding in that they are going to twist a dramatic, like, knife, because Will is just wandering around Cheapside, this poor area of London, and he is convinced that his father is dead. Mm-hmm. He's like, it's 12 years, my father was an old man, we live in a horrible society, so he's probably dead now. And he speaks to a little girl who, like, admires him as a knight, and tells him that whenever they play knights, she always plays as him, which I just thought was a delightful touch. Mm-hmm. But she drops that, like, oh, he asks, like, oh, do you remember an old man who used to live in this place? And she goes, oh, do you mean your father? And so he goes to visit his father and discovers that his father is blind, and they have, like, this reunion where he tells his father that, like, no, you did everything right for me. I changed my stars, and now I'm a knight. And they have this beautiful kind of tearful reunion. And his father tells him that, his roof leaks, and Will's like, well, that is not befitting a Thatcher. And his father can't fix his own roof because he's blind. So Will goes up and does it instead. And Adamar's spies catch him in the act.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, that this movie stops being this goofy little comedy right here. There's some stakes where it's really a nice, touching, emotional scene between Will and the dad. And again, I don't remember what the actor's name is who plays the dad, but he's fantastic in this movie. I absolutely buy that as a blind Thatcher in 1370.
Mm-hmm. That is Christopher Kazanov.
Okay, yeah, he absolutely owns. Just, again, every single supporting actor or actress in this movie absolutely owns their character and just makes it believable. And so Will is there with his dad, and it's very touching that the dad learns that everything I wanted for my son came true. He had a great life. He's not the son of a Thatcher. And now we find out Will's going back to the tournament, and there's policemen there, and all his squires come up to Will, and they say, you can't go back to the tournament. Someone followed you to Cheapside. They know you're not a knight. They know you're just the son of the poor Thatcher. And they're all encouraging him, you better run. Like, they're going to arrest you. They're going to throw you in the jail in the stocks.
You're going to be tortured, dude.
Yeah, you don't want to be in a medieval prison. That is not the place to be.
And like, every single person is advising him to run away.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone in his life is telling him to run. And Will, because he is the sort of wild, out of control, idealist character that he is, keeps refusing them. Every single person who is close to him and important to him has like a moment with him where they tell him, you need to run because this is going to destroy you. And he keeps insisting that I do not turn away. I never reject a fight. And so he just goes and he gets arrested because of his pride.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, he believes he's a knight. He goes, I live like a knight. I fight like a knight. A knight would not back down. A knight would go up there and face the music. And they're like, all right, well, your funeral. So Will basically gets thrown into jail, and which is wonderful because his first visitor is not the beautiful Princess Jocelyn. No, his first visitor is Adamar, who's going to come and kick the crap out of him in jail.
Yeah, which is like, again, there are definitely sports movies where the bully character, the villain character, can like learn something like embarrassing or compromising about the protagonist. But this is a movie where that character has like real political power and agency over that person. So the protagonist ends up in a torture chamber instead.
Yeah, and again, I keep comparing this movie to The Quick and the Dead. You haven't seen this, but people who know that movie would know there's a scene at the end of the movie where Gene Hackman's about to fight Russell Crowe, and it's the big bad guy against the good guy. Right before that, they get Russell Crowe thrown in jail, and then Gene Hackman breaks his fingers before the big gunfight, which is exactly like this. You got to turn the screws just a little more on the hero to make him suffer right before the big fight.
Oh, yeah. And we get to the other, like, big inspiring scenes. So, like, we have Adamar, like, again, tell Will that he has been found wanting as he's, like, personally come into this prison cell to torture him. And then the next thing we see is Will in the stocks.
Yeah.
And there's a crowd of people who used to be fans of Sir Ulrich, who, now hate William Thatcher, the person who thought he could pretend to be a knight. And slowly out of the woodwork, everyone from Will's entourage shows up to defend him from people who are, throwing fruits and hitting him while he is in the stocks.
Yeah. And that's one of those tropes I always love in these medieval movies. If these people are so poor, why are they throwing their food at people? Like,
right,
they're the
exactly.
last people that should be flinging vegetables at somebody.
And, it's touching. Everyone sort of announces their loyalty to Will and how they'll do anything to protect him. And then a voice through the crowd tells everyone to stop. And the prince shows up.
Oh, this is such a great moment. Again, this is the part where I almost start tearing up, and that's a vicious rumor that I tear up at this movie. But if I were to, it would be about right here. Where, I'm
sure there is a point in my life where I teared up at this point because it is delivered with there's not a trace of irony in how this plays out, which is buck wild.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's so serious and dramatic here. All of a sudden, this figure in the crowd comes out. And again, for people who don't know what stocks are, William is in the, with his head in the boards and his hands sticking out where he's in Village Square just being humiliated by everybody. And all of a sudden, this mysterious figure comes in. And this is, lo and behold, it's Prince Edward earlier in the movie, the one who who Will was so nice to and gave him his dignity and wouldn't the only person who would joust against him. I was the only person that treated this guy like another knight. And Prince Edward, again, who is the biggest celebrity apparently in England, he's the future king. He walks out of the crowd and everyone just, oh, they're like in awe that Edward's here. And Edward is like, so you tried to joust and you weren't a knight. Like me, you too had to hide your identity to do what you really loved. And then he's like, release this man. And then then he's got this great speech where he turns to the crowd. He says, my researchers had discovered that this man has a lineage that goes way back as a very ancient line of kings. So he is indeed nobility. And this is the great line here where he says, as it is, this is my word, and my word is beyond contestation.
And he dubs him Sir William right there on the spot.
Yeah.
And like it is just this sort of beautiful emotional moment that is way, way overwrought, and I like done so well. People are working with some very strange material, but they're doing their best with it, and it works really well. And so immediately, Will. The tournament is still happening, and they're like, you haven't withdrawn yet. You are still. Ulrich was scheduled to face Adhemar, so William Thatcher will now ride to face Adhemar, and we have to get there immediately. So Will, who has spent the night in like a torture chamber, who has spent the day in the stocks, like gets dressed up. He's tired, but he is going to face his rival, like the person who's been built up at as the best jouster around before him.
Yeah, and I can't overstate enough just for how fun this scene is. This is literally like Popeye eating a can of spinach right here, where Will all of a sudden rises out of the stocks. He's dubbed a knight, and all of a sudden the crowd is in awe of him because he is an actual knight now. He has lineage, and all of a sudden all his prestige is back, and you just see in Will's eyes, like, I'm going to take down Adhemar. And Edward's like, you haven't withdrawn, right? Are you fit to compete? And he's like, hell yeah! So here we go with the big sports moment at the end. Again, for people like you who don't like sports movies, here we go. Something that's completely palatable because they've done such a good job setting up these characters, setting up the story, setting up the rivalry, and just making Adhemar the biggest douche ever in a movie. Here we go. Here's the big revenge right here, and we go to the finals. It's Will, who is now Sir William, against Adhemar. And Adhemar, of course, as all villains do, is not going to take this as a pure game of chance. No, he is going to stack the odds in his favor that Adhemar has now tipped his lance. Now he's not just lancing. Now he's got like a finely sharpened stick underneath the little fist at the end of his lance. So he's going to impale Will.
He's put like an actual point on the lance, and we established earlier in the film that he has a little fist that sort of decorates the tip of his lance. That fist, one of his minions informs him, is made out of spun sugar, and beneath it is this point, and they're going to use that to pierce Will's armor and injure him to stack the odds in Adhemar's favor. So going into this match, we know the odds aren't even already because Will has been tortured the night before by Adhemar himself. Now we know Adhemar is like hidden a blade in his lance, and Chaucer comes in to deliver a truly emotionally touching version of his hype man speeches that he was giving before.
Yeah, although we're leaving out one part here, is that at the start of the match we have Sir William lined up against what's his face, Adhemar, and all of a sudden he's looking around. Where's Jocelyn? Where's my girlfriend?
That's
Jocelyn?
Right.
She's not there. Jocelyn has gone to get his blind father, to get John Thatcher. She's going to bring him to the arena. It's the first time that the blind father has ever seen, aka heard, his son lance or a joust in life. So it's like this big emotional moment. The first two lances come, and the first one, Adhemar, his lance with the spear on the end has destroyed William's shoulder. It basically pierces his shoulder, and Will can't hold the spear anymore. And the second one, he can't even hold the spear. He just gets waylaid by a lance to the chest, and he's down 2-0 in the points, which we learned earlier in the movie. If you break your lance on somebody's armor, it's worth 1 point. If you break it on their helmet, it's worth 2 points. And if you knock them off the horse, it's 3 points. So after 2 lances, Will is down 2-0. He can't even lift his arm. His arm has been speared. And all of a sudden, here it comes where the dad shows up at the arena, and Princess Jocelyn's there, and it's this big emotional moment. And then Chaucer's like, hey, wait a minute, I never gave my little hype speech. So,
that's right. Yeah.
He said, like you said, he jumps up there and he gives his most amazing, here he is, I don't know, what does he say? I didn't even write down the speech, but it's such a fantastic little speech, his little hype, his little WWE entrance here.
Yeah, he points out that Will is one of the members of the crowd because, like, one of the first things in one of Chaucer's first speeches he addressed, he said, "My lords, my ladies, and everyone else in this arena not sitting on a cushion," and he's like playing to the crowd. And in this one, he's like, "This person is one of you. Was born in Cheapside, just a few blocks away from here, and now he is here today before you as a noble, as a knight," and like. He talks about like Will's whole journey sort of encompassed in this and how Will is like of this true noble line of knights who honorably don't run away from challenges. And it's just such a great emotional note that, again, like if you were handed this script, if you're Paul Bettany, if you're acclaimed actor Paul Bettany and you read this script, you know it's stupid, but he turns in.
It works. He
makes it work. Yeah. He makes those words dazzle. And like sets this up. And Will, is at this point, he can barely hold his lance. He feels that his armor is too heavy and he can't move in his armor. So he has his friends take his armor off and physically tie his lance to his arm.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, it's like every cliche we can do here for the sports movie. Let's stack the odds against Will as much as we can. Now he's the last thing. We're riding one more time against Adamar. He must unseat Adamar to win this, or Adamar will not only win the match, but Will be embarrassed in front of his father, and I believe
he'll die.
He's going to die. He's going to get hit with a lance in the chest with no armor. Will be dead if he doesn't win this point, and then Adamar will not only do that, but he has apparently entered into negotiations to marry Jocelyn, so he's also going to steal his girl.
Mm-hmm. Like everything.
The triple whammy. It's terrible.
So Will rides out against Adamar with no armor, and they pointed out in the movie earlier, one of like Adamar's minions said that as a knight, Ulrich was fearless because I think Adamar himself pointed this out to Jocelyn. Mm-hmm. There's a chance when you are struck with a lance that a piece of it could fly through your visor and your armor and blind you. But Will would never turn his head away to protect himself, so he could always keep his eyes on the target. And we're seeing that fearlessness again as he rides out against Adamar without any armor, fully confident that he can unseat him. And as he strikes Adamar in the chest, which does knock him off the horse, Will screams his own name. He just says, "William!" as he's like jabbing him with his lance. And we go into this weird dream sequence that Adamar is having as he is being unseated. Like what the camera is trying to imply with this perspective. And like, I get a lot of people I show this movie to the first time are incredibly confused by this sequence, but we are seeing Adamar floating in the air as he has just been unseated from his horse. He has a vision of William and all of his friends standing above him to deliver the line back to him. "You have been weighed, you have been measured, and you have been found wanting." It's like so dramatic. Like we get that time freeze from Adamar's vision, and then bam, he hits the ground.
Yeah, it's so awesome because this is exactly what you want to see. That's why this movie works so well. That is exactly what you want to see. You want to see Adamar knocked on his ass. You want to see Will and his friends come over and use the exact same little catchphrase, "You have been weighed, you have been measured." The only thing that would have been more exciting and more over the top is if when Adamar was hit by the lance, if he exploded. That would have been awesome.
Yeah.
Big old Michael Bay explosion as Adamar goes up.
Perhaps if there was a punch bowl that had been left in the stadium and he fell backwards into that.
I should point out that I'm a writer in real life. I do a lot of writing. And one of the things that when I'm writing an especially good article and about to post it on the internet, just like Will, I scream my own name. I'm like, "Mario!"
You gotta. After, like, if I'm about to do an important role on my podcast, I always just have to scream my name, just to make sure the dice get the point. It's just, there's so much, like, if you put these details about this movie in a like see them on their own for their own value. It's stupid. It is a dumb movie, but the way that it's made and the way the people who made it brought everything together just made it work in a way that it had no right to, which is just so much fun.
Yeah, again, we go back to that one word. When you're going to the movies, you want to enjoy yourself. You want to have fun. I can think of very few movies that are as enjoyable when this movie clicks and it works, and you got, again, what a great villain can do to your story. You just want to see that villain get his comeuppance at the end. It's so satisfying, and Adamar gets it perfectly. It's just a wonderful ending to this movie. Will wins. His dad cheers. Prince Edward cheers. Will has indeed changed his stars. He has found his place. Jocelyn comes out and they make out in the middle of the arena, and then as one does in a medieval movie, AC/DC kicks in and we start playing You Shook Me All Night Long, and we cut up to the stars, which I know there's some reference to what constellation they go to there. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it's actually some literary constellation that ties into what's going on in the story. But do you know what the stars are?
No.
All right, well, we'll ask our astronomer friends who listen, all three of them that listen to Staff Picks, to write in what the star joke is there, because I know there's a joke there somewhere.
Yeah. And like, this is one of those films where you can tell that at least some of the people who made this movie had a lot of fun with it. It actually has a post-credit sequence where everyone except William, like all of the squires, are having a farting competition at the end that has, like, there's no way that fit in the movie. Mm-hmm. Like, they filmed that as a post-credit sequence. It's so strange. But, like, it definitely goes a long way to show you of, like, what a delight this was for the people who made it.
Yeah. Heath Ledger's off making Brokeback Mountain or something serious. They're like, hey, come back, we got some reshoots. We got to do this fart scene.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I'm good. You guys do that one. Wow, what a fun movie to talk about. This is one of those that I really hope... I would assume most of my listeners, I know my listeners tend to like obscure stuff like I do. This is one that I would hope a lot of people know already, but I would advise you to watch this one again and just really get into the spirit of it, because I can think of few movies that work as well as this one when it's really clicking. And again, just so much fun, so enjoyable, and so distinct. There's no other movie. Again, The Quick and the Dead is the closest I can think of, and this one's even more over the top than that one with all the modern music and stuff. It's just a crazy fun time for inventive movies that were coming out. And again, this one kind of got buried because, it came out in May of 2001, and then 9/11 happened 4 months later, and there was a time there for people who didn't live through that where you really weren't supposed to enjoy fun movies or comedies anymore. Everything was kind of deadly serious in America in pop culture.
Yeah.
And this is the type of movie that would absolutely be buried and forgotten because it was such frivolous crap. But I don't care. I love frivolous crap, especially when it's well done and it has great acting, and that's why I cannot say enough about this movie, and please just remember that my word is beyond contestation.
Yes, absolutely. I highly recommend that folks check out this movie. It is like one of my great disappointments that there was never like a Chaucer spin-off movie, because I feel like that, the ground there is still ripe. Paul Bettany's riding high off of that Marvel money. Might as well go out there and make a Chaucer sequel for this film. But like, if you do watch this movie, do yourself a favor, take the time to enjoy every single one of Jocelyn's costumes. They're all amazing. And really drink in this world. As somebody who does a lot of role-playing games, like, this movie is great storytelling inspiration. The attitude and world that they've built around this is like definitely energy that you can use in your own creative projects. It's just so much fun and definitely does not have the accolades that it deserves.
Yeah, and especially on that last lance when William rides at Adamar and unseats him, he must have rolled the hell out of initiative on that one.
Oh, yes. That is a critical success right there.
And the screaming of the name, of course, which is what we must do. All right. So anyway, I want to thank you for joining me. That was a lot of fun. Again, James and I have never met before. This is literally the first time we'd ever talked, and this was one of the more enjoyable podcasts I've done. I really appreciate you coming on, and clearly you know this movie like the back of your hand. I really appreciated that, because this is one that it's so much fun to talk to with someone who really gets into movies like this, because it's odd to me that not everyone does, but some people don't get into movies like this. So I really appreciate that you're the type of person who does.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Mario. This was a delight to talk about. I would be happy to come back anytime.
Excellent. Is there anything else you'd like to plug? Any way people can reach you? I know you talked about your podcast. If you want to plug that one more time.
Yeah. If you want to check out more of my work, head over to oneshotpodcast.com. There, I do the show One Shot, where we take groups of different improvisers, comedians, and game designers, and we play a variety of different role-playing systems. Most people are familiar with games like Dungeons and Dragons, but there is a wide variety of games out there that I know people would love and enjoy. You might want to check out our episodes of Star-Crossed. It is a 2-player role-playing game where you play out a romance story of 2 characters who really, really want to get together, but have a really good reason not to. It is a delightful game, and I think it is a good cinematic experience. It's a great way to jump on with the show, but you can hop around anywhere in those archives to figure out what we're about. If you want to talk to me and my thoughts on movies, you can always hit me up on Twitter. I am at OneShotRPG on Twitter.
Excellent. So I guess the mission now is we got to find another movie that both of us like, and I'm sure whenever that happens, it will be my pride, it will be my privilege, nay, my pleasure. I had to quote Chaucer one last time.
Got to get those Chaucer quotes in there.
All right, again, anybody who wants to reach me, again, this is Staff Picks. My name is Mario Lanza. You can reach me at Twitter, at Mario J. Lanza. If you have email feedback, if you have any movies you think I'd like to talk about or you think would make a good show, you can reach me at staffpickspodcast@gmail.com. And until the next time I talk to you guys, I will be out there searching for more underrated, underloved, obscure, unknown movies, and I hope to find somebody interesting that wants to come on and talk about them. I'll talk to you guys later. Keep on protecting that Italian virginity. Bye.